everybody, it's me, Margaret, just calmly sitting here working on this moss stitch cotton mini blanket, so to speak. We're going to use this for pets to sit on, and it will match this room once I get all the accessories done in here, because these will be my accent colors. Now, we talked about this last time. I was using the Lily's Sugar and Cream cotton. I just happened to have a whole lot of this and was looking for a way to put it to use when I noticed how well it matched this painting that I have in this room where I'm taking the accent colors from. So I thought, I don't really enjoy working with this. It will probably fade, or rather bleed. I just hate to use that word bleed on one another, because that's what I have found to be true for this brand. Now, I know some of you like it, and you know, that's just par for the course. We're not all going to like the same things, but I did buy it, and it is durable, and so I just thought, why not? Let's just work it up and see how it turns out. Now, initially, I was not doing the moss stitch. I was doing more of a spiked stitch, and I found it very, very difficult to work with. Doing that stitch. It's a tighter type stitch, so this yarn, which doesn't flow nicely against each other, it just didn't work out very well for me. So I ripped the whole thing out, and I've got much straighter ends on this. I'm using this moss stitch, which I'll have to say is a second cousin to that spike stitch that I was doing. It's just looser and therefore easier to work with. Both the spike and the moss stitch are single crochet chain 1, but moss stitch goes into the space created with that chain 1, but spike stitch goes right over that space and into the row below to create a spike. Look again, here's the moss stitch going into the space, and here's the spike stitch reaching over it. The spike stitch makes a more dense fabric and blends those color rows together a bit more. But let me show you something interesting. I had bought this all in one lot, so all the die lot numbers match. And yet, when I pulled this skein out, the blues are far darker than the blues have been. They were, I don't know if you can tell or not, but they're very, very light here. And then when I pulled out this new skein, you can see where they got a lot darker. Now, this part right here actually comes from the previous skein, and the reason why it's here in the middle of the skein was because I had actually pulled this off the skein before when I was joining colors. I'm trying to be very cognizant when I pick up a new skein to see where I left off, like what color was I using, and then when I pull it out of the middle, on finer yarns a lot of times it will be the right color to continue on with your project, but not always, and in this case it hasn't been at all. So I'll just pull it out and throw it on the floor like you see here, and then I'll find another opportunity to work it in when I get to that point so it doesn't go to waste. So it just kind of sits there and waits on its opportunity, but it's coming along really well and I like it. Now, this doesn't bother me all that much, but it is a common occurrence among all 8 of the skeins I have. There's this funny little spots where the dye didn't take, and they're only on one side of the strand, but they pop up frequently. I can imagine this would drive a perfectionist bonkers, and so that's why I'm making you aware. Okay, let's talk about this moss stitch for just a second. Basically what it is, well, do you see that space right there? You do a single crochet into that space and chain 1 to create another space. Then you skip over this single crochet, and you go right into the space again. Single crochet, chain 1. Single crochet in the space, chain 1. Now, this stitch goes by a million different names, and this is so common in the crochet world. Moss stitch is probably what I would call the most common. It's also called the linen stitch, the woven stitch, and the granite stitch. Now think back to the last video when I was showing this hat. This is a stitch that is a single crochet followed by a double crochet. Single and double and single and double. And I could not remember the name of this stitch to save my life. And I thought, was it the seed stitch or the moss stitch? I don't know. And Brenda came on and said it's called the lemon peel stitch. I had never heard that one, but I didn't rule it out because so many crochet stitches have different names. So using up the rest of this old yarn, this cottonese that I had received from a big giant bag of Goodwill purchase that I did. By the way, this is cotton and some acrylic, which is probably why I really liked working with it so well. It's so smooth. Anyhow, I made up some samples of those two stitches that I just talked about. Now over here is the moss stitch. Let me zoom in a little bit. This is the moss stitch done flat, which is what I have been doing, also known as the linen and the granite and the woven stitch. And then this is the seed stitch, and that's the one that's the double crochet followed by a single crochet, and you did that all the way across, and then when you go back you're doing a reverse. You'll put a double into the single crochet and continue on alternating across. Now this is what it looks like in the round. Can you kind of see how it swoops up, which is really nice. This is in the round without joining. I just, continue doing it. And then this is when you go back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. So it makes a nice little nubby texture, which would be great for a dishcloth, as this sample appears to be. But it also makes a great texture for anything. I just really like it. And that's one thing with crochet, is you can get some really interesting textures. But doesn't it look kind of like the skin of a lemon? And just so you don't have to use your imagination, I pulled it out. The only difference is those little bumps are so much more random than the nice pattern here with the lemon peel or seed stitch. And just out of curiosity, do you know any more names for this stitch right here? Remember, it's single crochet, double crochet all the way across, and then when you reverse it, you put the double in the single and the single in the double all the way across. So let me know if you know any more names. Now let's talk about some of the comments that you had regarding last video. Some are some really good hints that you could possibly benefit from. Now I was talking about this baby blanket that I made in the last video, and I told you how I made a big mistake by not remembering to mark my pattern as I went, so I knew where to pick up when I left off, right? And I knew better than that, rookie mistake, but I tend to use a sticky note to mark my places. Now my easiest way of marking a pattern is to just take a sticky note and I cover up what I just completed, so I actually work down. So if I just completed row 1, then I cover it up. Done, okay, and then I go to the next row. But there are times when you might have a lot to do on one round or one row. And then in that case, then I may take my sticky note. Sometimes I use the little small ones that look like an arrow that points, and I'll go exactly to where I need to do until I catch on what it is. So example, I'll go, this says chain 1, single crochet in the same row as joining, chain 5, and then I'm like, wait, okay, just let me just do that much. So I'll do it, and then I'll cover it up. And then I glance back over and it says, skip 2 double crochet, single crochet in the next stitch. So I'll do just that much, and then I'll go along and cover it up. Turn. You can see how it's easy, you follow along. But Linda Hutchinson popped in and she said, I almost forgot a suggestion about following your patterns. She puts them in a page protector, the plastic page protectors, and then you can mark your progress using either highlighters or dry erase markers. The latter can be wiped away for later use, and the patterns can be neatly stored in 3-ring binders between use, and which is a great idea, and I have done that before. And my problem is that I travel. Not exactly travel as in car trips, that's not what I'm talking about, although I do that, that's true. But what I'm referring to is like I have to go to the doctor's office and sit in the waiting room. I'll just grab a project and stuff it in a bag and off I go. And when I used the page protectors, I ended up making a mess of them because I would just stuff them. Let's say I'm sitting in the dentist office and I'm doing whatever and they call my name. Well, I don't want to make them wait on me, so I just take everything and stuff it down in the bag, and so I ruined the page protector that way. Other times I have forgotten my pencil or my pen or whatever, but I know those of you who are much more organized than I am would really like something like this, and that's why I'm telling it to you, because just because I goofed it up doesn't mean it isn't a great idea. And then here's another good one. This came from Kitty Welton, and I've never done this before. She says, I write each row in the pattern on index cards. I punch a hole in the corner and put in a ring, and then I turn it over each time I do a row. This makes keeping track a breeze. I also write big because I'm visually challenged. So that's a clever idea. And you know, I really like it when you use your creativity to problem solve. She came up with a super idea for her. I also think this would be a really good idea for beginners. If you are not in the habit of reading patterns and you're just getting used to it, what an excellent way to make sure that you're doing one row at a time. And there's another way that I used to use all the time. Let me show it to you now. But for several years, I used this thing. Now, it says it's a Knitter's Pride brand. I'm sure other people make these. I assume you can still get this. I'm not even sure. It's been a really long time. But this is metal in here, and it's magnetic. So the concept is you put your paper down here, and you have these heavy-duty magnets that hold it into place, and they really are heavy duty. I mean, it just sucks it down in there. And then you have these things, and it would, you know, mark your place. Basically, you would do the same thing. I always like to cover up what I've completed, and I work down like that. Now, I did take one of these and break it, and the reason why is because there are plenty of times when your pattern is written in only half a page, and I just wanted to, you know, have just that much. I would get confused sometimes if it was going across. Was I working in this column or this column? You know, let me figure out where I was. And so that's why I broke it and did it like that. So, but it is a pretty neat thing. Over on this side, it's got a pocket with Velcro closures. Now, I wouldn't put my work directly in there because I wouldn't want to have to deal with this rough Velcro, but maybe you could have a small project bag and insert a pair of, you know, socks that you're working on in there if you wanted to. But I think I used it for a notepad because, you know, here's a little thing where you could put a pen. You could keep notes to, you know, do whatever you need to, extra or whatever. I don't even know what else one might want that for. But so I'll look this up just in case this interests anybody. It actually is a very clever product, to be honest with you. I liked it a lot. The difference and the reason why I stopped using it was because I take my work with me on the go, and it was just one thing that was a little bit bigger. It is kind of heavy, and it's easier for me just to print the piece of paper out, fold it up, and stuff it into my bag. However, if you're working on a big project that you want to leave at home, this is ideal. This is really nice. Now, another topic that came up in the comments section was my use of aquarium gravel for the weights that I made. I made 2 little bean bags using aquarium gravel. This makes the little weights actually washable. And this isn't anything new. I've actually talked about it in my old videos, so some of my old subscribers will probably remember this. We had been talking about weighted blankets, and I needed something that was more cost-effective than those little pellets that you buy at the craft stores, but it had to be washable. And so one day I was out walking the dog, and I happened to just look down, and you know how on intersections where rocks, those tiny little pea gravel rocks, all gather? I thought, rocks, that would be awesome. So that's a free alternative. If you only need a little bit to make, say, 2 bean bags or whatever, go out to the corner and sweep up some pea gravel, and boom, well, you've got some free filling. That's also good for amigurumi when you have to weight a little something. You know, I'm talking about if you're making something and you need it to stand up straight, and you might put some weights down in the bottom. This is a super way to do something like that for free. I mean, it's out there for anybody. You just don't get run over by a car. On the other hand, aquarium gravel is inexpensive. It comes in different colors and whatever, but I would suggest inexpensive options always when available. And another thing came up was the cookie recipe. Tucker was using one of my old recipes to bake cookies in that last video. And so several of you had asked for the recipe. And let me tell you what, all it is the Nestle's Toll House recipe. You can find that on the internet. Just search it up. But the key here, and this is what we like, we don't like our cookies to, you don't want to break them and then crumbs fly everywhere. We don't like a crisp cookie. We like more of a chewy cookie. So instead of just softening the butter that it calls for, try melting half of it. I can't remember exactly how much butter it calls for, but take half of it and melt it in the microwave. Let the other half be softened as the recipe calls for, and you'll get a different texture to your cookie. Melt all of it and you'll get a really bendy, soft cookie, which is just really, really good. And then also something that we like to do, though Tucker doesn't know this, I haven't shared this with him yet, but I always put milk chocolate chips in there instead of the semi-chocolate chips. Is that what it's called? No, semi-sweet. Forgot a whole word. The semi-sweet are better for you because it doesn't have as much sugar in there. And the darker the chocolate that you can tolerate, the better it is for you, because it also has that other chemical in it that's escaping me right this very minute. But bottom line, no candy is good for you. But if you're going to eat it, the darker the chocolate, the better. But we really like the milk chocolate. So I'm the chef tonight, and I am making a butternut squash soup, which is quite delicious. Let's see where I got this recipe. I will put a link in the description box below. It's from 𝖀𝐼, and I'll put the link. It's Instant Pot butternut squash soup. Very simple. You chop everything up. If you can get the butternut squash already chopped and peeled, then it makes it so much easier. But we had a farmer's market, and so I bought some butternut squash, and I got Thomas's help to chop it for me, and then got it in here. But anyway, that's nice. So it's fresh from the garden. Now I do want to mention that I leave out the carrot and the Granny Smith apple because I don't want that extra sugar. I don't want those extra carbs in my soup. So, but I have had it that way and it was delicious, but we can do without it and have a lower carb soup. Do y'all do this when you have leftovers, like the ends of things that you're not going to use? My mother taught me to save this stuff in a bag in the freezer, and then you can later use it to make a vegetable broth. So I never buy chicken broth. That's not true. I buy it if I'm in a pinch, but for the most part, I make it from chicken carcasses that we have left over, and for vegetable broth, I make it from leftover pieces that you cook like this. You can actually even put this papery stuff from onions, but I never do that. I don't know why. I just can't get my head around that one. So when this bag is full, then I know it's time to make some vegetable broth. And another thing I'm doing right now while I have my mess all out on the counter is I'm going to chop up these onions. We were having a hard time buying chopped frozen onions at the store. They just weren't available. So I'm using my little handy chopper here, and I'm going to chop these fresh ones up because it is my most dreaded task. Do not like it. Keep them in the freezer and they're ready to go. Okay, so that's what it looks like in there. Can you get it, Tucker? And then we're going to use this handy dandy immersion blender that I got recently to chop it all up. If I could remember how to use it. Okay, well I gotta add a can of coconut milk, and I was trying to get full fat coconut milk, and oftentimes when you open it, it'll be really thick right here, but for whatever reason this one doesn't look like the normal. I've never bought this brand before, but that's supposed to give us the cream. Half a can. Is that about half a can?
Yeah, looks to be.
A little more?
A little more.
Okay, and then we mix it a little more. Look at my good dog. He just sits outside in his little yard and rolls around, maybe checks out the other side of the yard, but he stays right within his boundaries. Oftentimes we have golfers stop and wave and marvel at him because they can't believe how he just stays put. But he's always been very attached to me, and now he's losing his hearing, so he's even more attached to me. He just won't go far. So yesterday I pulled out the pressure washer, and it did great taking most of that loose paint off. There's still some tiny bits here and there, and it would take off the top layer, but not necessarily the bottom layer, all except for down here in the base. So that's a little tricky. Not sure if I'm going to continue to chip it off or what I should do next. May just paint over it. We'll just wait to see. So look at the tomato plants. They are doing so well. And right here I see some little blooms coming up. So I think that's where our first tomatoes will be. I don't see any others anywhere else. And this light raises up, and so we had to lift it because the plants are getting so big. So as usual, thanks for hanging out with me. That's all I've got in this video. If you haven't subscribed, what you waiting for? Hit the subscribe button because you just never know what you're going to find on this channel. Thanks for watching. I'll talk to you soon. Bye.